Today on the deep dive, we are confronting a massive economic puzzle. I mean, really a huge one. It's a question that holds what, something like $121 billion in the balance? The big question is this. Why is Canada, a country that seems to be sprinting headlong into a fully digital future, simultaneously clinging to a record amount of physical cash?
It really is a fundamental paradox of modern life, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is. I mean, if you look at the transaction data, the shift is it's
Mm.
undeniable. Paper money only accounted for, what, a slim 20% of all transactions last year.
And that's a massive drop.
And a huge drop from more than half of all payments back in 2009.
Yeah.
We are clearly heading full speed toward the tap and go digital wallet.
Mm.
But then you hit the inventory data and things just get weird. You have a record $121 billion of Canadian bills. Loonies, 20s, hundreds actually in circulation.
So it's not being used for daily purchases, but it's sitting somewhere.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. If we're using cash less, why are we holding on to it more fiercely than ever? What does that $121 billion tell us about what Canadians secretly value?
That 121 billion, that's the collective emergency fund. And it speaks volumes about some really deep-seated anxieties. Our sources show that the nominal value of cash the average Canadian keeps in their wallet has actually more than doubled since 2009.
Doubled. Wow.
And that's not even counting the emergency stash tucked away at home, the typical amount there.
Mhm.
It sits at a pretty hefty $472.
Okay, so this tension between digital use and physical hoarding is exactly why this deep dive is so critical right now.
It is. Because the pressure isn't just coming from consumer convenience. There is legislative pressure right now,
Yeah.
actively threatening to kill the entire cash ecosystem.
Right, we're talking about government policy that could essentially render that emergency stash you have under the floorboards worthless. Not by making it illegal, but by making it impossible to spend because no retailer is willing to accept it.
Exactly.
So what is the source of this pressure?
We're examining measures that were initially introduced in legislation known as Bill C-2, which aimed to toughen anti-money laundering laws. Certain parts have been transferred into the current Bill C-12, and what's fascinating here is how these specific actions, designed to target major organized crime, could end up creating a critical headache for every small business and vulnerable consumer.
Let's clarify those specific proposals. Which measures pose this sort of existential threat to cash acceptance?
Two main proposals really stand out, and they both involve transactions over $10,000. First, the legislation aims to make it illegal for anyone, a person, a business, a bank, a charity, to accept a single cash payment, donation, or deposit of $10,000 or more.
Wait, hold on. I thought transactions over 10,000 were already reported to the federal government's Financial Intelligence Unit. Is this banning the transaction entirely?
Precisely. Up until now, transactions over that amount required extensive reporting. This proposal moves way past reporting and straight into prohibition.
So a legitimate business can't make a large cash sale.
Think about it. If a cash-heavy business, say a used car lot or a major retailer, makes an honest $10,001 sale, they physically cannot take the money, even if they were prepared to report it to FinTrack.
That feels like an almost deliberate way to force compliance by making cash trade unviable at scale. What's the second threat?
The second is forbidding night drops. These are the secure mail slots and processes businesses use to deposit large amounts of cash earnings after banking hours. Look, if you introduce enough hassle, enough risk, and outright prohibition around large cash deposits, you quickly convince retailers that it's simply not worth the trouble of accepting cash at all.
I see.
Jay Zagorski, he's the author of The Power of Cash. He makes this point beautifully simple. Cash is defined by universal acceptance. If enough shops go cashless, that universal acceptance just vanishes. And your $472 emergency fund, it loses its foundational value.
That really sets the stage. Government action is threatening to make cash unusable, yet we have this enormous unspoken commitment to physical currency represented by that $121 billion. Let's start with the most compelling reason to protect it, the resiliency case. We often take the digital world for granted until it fails. Think about what a digital transaction actually requires to function. It relies on what's been called the triple threat of necessary infrastructure. What are those three components?
So you need electricity to power the machines and run the servers. You need a communications network, so Wi-Fi or cellular connectivity. And finally, you need a secure, centralized payment system to authorize the whole transaction.
If you lose just one of those.
If you lose even one of those three, the system grinds to a halt.
That's the aha moment that hits home during a crisis.
Absolutely. And when we talk about resiliency, we're talking about anything that jeopardizes power and communication networks. I mean, natural disasters are the obvious example. Wildfires, floods, earthquakes, they routinely take down infrastructure.
And that's where cash becomes essential because it exists completely outside of that triple threat grid.
It does. Zagorski warned anyone who relies solely on digital payments to, really consider their crisis planning.
Hmm.
He says, if you use your cell phone to pay for everything, after a day or two without power, your battery is dead,
Hmm.
and you are literally unable to conduct commerce or buy food.
But cash never breaks down.
Dash never breaks. It relies on zero network connectivity.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of resiliency isn't just about surviving a local disaster in Toronto or Calgary. It has profound geopolitical implications.
Oh, absolutely. The security cash offers is decentralized, which makes it vital when centralized digital systems are compromised or they're just failing.
Right.
We saw this play out dramatically and tragically following the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. Cash use spiked, sharply, across the country as infrastructure was targeted and compromised. People needed a universally accepted way to transact when digital lines were down or just unreliable.
Yeah.
The European Central Bank even confirmed this trend. They noted that the closer a country is geographically to Ukraine, the higher the demand for large denomination bills.
Wow.
It just highlights cash's function as a critical buffer against state-level disruption, whether that's from hackers targeting financial systems or, active hostility from other nations.
It's genuinely unsettling to realize the money you use to buy a coffee is also a fundamental piece of national defense infrastructure. That really changes how you view it.
It does.
So if it's a buffer for the nation, how does it help buffer the individual against financial trouble in their own daily life?
That's a great bridge. We move from macro security to micro security, personal finance. Cash is arguably the best budgeting tool ever invented because of the physical constraint it provides.
You mean like the envelope system?
Exactly. It imposes a true hard cap budget. You can only spend what you physically have on you at that moment.
Right.
Contrast that with credit cards, where the consumer mindset is often to just spend up to their limit. And the result is clear in our data. Nearly 1/3 of Canadians currently have unpaid credit card balances. They're locked into a debt spiral where cash could have imposed discipline.
So better individual finance. But businesses also benefit, right?
They absolutely do. Businesses prefer cash for a very simple economic reason. It lets them avoid steep credit card processing fees. These fees are a significant operational cost that just gets baked right into consumer pricing. By favoring cash, businesses can keep prices stable or even lower for customers.
And this ties back to the legislative threats we were talking about.
It does. Corinne Pullman of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the CFIB, she raised a critical point about the night drop ban.
What's the unintended consequence there?
Well, while the government wants to ban night drops to reduce the movement of large, potentially illicit funds, the CFIB warns this could actually increase local crime risk.
How so?
By forcing businesses to keep all their accumulated cash earnings in an unsecured safe overnight, they become a much more enticing target for robbery. It's an administrative barrier that could introduce actual physical danger.
That's a serious trade-off. Okay, so we've covered resilience and business economics, but the argument for cash preservation, it really solidifies when we look at social justice and inclusion.
That's right. We can't simply sleepwalk into a cashless society. A 2023 report by McGill's Max Bell School of Public Policy issued a serious warning about the severe impact this shift would have on already disadvantaged groups.
For those of us who just assume everyone is digitally connected, what are the stats that prove financial exclusion is a real threat?
The primary statistic is that 12% of adult Canadians, that's millions of people, do not have a credit card. They often rely solely on cash for all their transactions. They might not have enough credit history or stable income, or they simply don't trust digital systems. Eliminating cash eliminates their ability to participate fully in the economy.
That sounds like systemic exclusion, not just a lifestyle choice.
It is systemic, and consider other groups. Victims of domestic abuse are often secretly advised to build a banknote stockpile specifically as a getaway fund.
I see.
If all transactions are digital, that lifeline is visible, traceable, and it can be instantly cut off by an abuser. Cash provides crucial autonomy and safety in these scenarios. Geography also matters. Cash is still king on most First Nation reserves where high-speed internet or reliable banking infrastructure might be scarce or, just too expensive. And many elderly citizens simply lack the desire or the technical comfort or the physical ability to figure out new payment apps and systems.
For them, cash is what they know.
It's their recognized currency. Forcing them online marginalizes them instantly.
It's clear this isn't just a Canadian problem. Are other countries recognizing this threat and taking action to protect the consumer's right to pay in physical currency?
They are. This is a globally recognized issue, and several governments have moved proactively. Some U.S. cities have already protected the consumer's right to pay in cash.
Right.
And even more strongly, several European countries are moving to enshrine the use of cash in their constitutions.
Enshrine it in the Constitution. That takes the protection of cash out of the hands of temporary legislation and makes it a fundamental right.
Precisely. Slovakia has already done this, and Switzerland and Austria have proposed similar constitutional amendments. It just shows that policymakers abroad understand cash isn't just some nostalgic item, it's a necessary public utility that must be protected, like access to clean water or electricity.
That is a fascinating parallel.
Yeah.
Now let's go directly to the heart of the legislation. The government's stated goal in pushing these cash restrictions, the $10,000 limit, the night drop ban, is to target organized crime and prevent money laundering. If we assume the vast majority of people are honest, how effective are these heavy-handed measures likely to be against the sophisticated criminals they're supposedly targeting? Here's where it gets really interesting.
Not very effective at all, according to the experts. Jay Zagorski dedicates significant analysis to, well, to dismantling the core notion that cash is still the primary lifeblood of major criminals.
Because the best crooks went digital a long time ago.
Exactly. The sophistication of organized crime has evolved far past duffel bags full of bills. A BC expert panel concluded back in 2019 that, quote, bags of cash not required to launder money.
Right.
Criminal enterprises are perfectly capable of moving massive funds through layered corporate structures, shell companies, and untraceable digital networks, including cryptocurrency.
And we have real-world proof of that digital shift in crime right here in Canada, which really makes the focus on physical cash puzzling.
We do. The federal anti-money laundering organization, FinTrake, recently announced a record $176 million fine against a cryptocurrency dealer.
$176 million? It's a staggering amount. What was the fine for?
The dealer failed to report over 1,000 digital transactions that were over the $10,000 threshold. That's a massive scale of illicit activity happening entirely in the digital realm.
So a ban on large cash deposits would have done nothing.
Zero impact on that type of money laundering. It shows you where the real battle against major financial crime is actually taking place.
And then there's also the widespread assumption that physical cash is the great facilitator of tax evasion.
The tax evasion myth. People assume cash under the table is just draining public coffers. However, Zagorski's calculations based on economic data show that even if every single person in business currently taking cash off the books suddenly paid all their federal taxes, total federal tax receipts would rise a mere 4%.
Only 4%. That seems almost negligible when you compare it to the social disruption this legislation could cause.
It is shockingly small. The overall conclusion, which, requires careful thought, is that Canada won't eliminate terrorism or corruption or money laundering by making cash less available. But it absolutely will make life dramatically more difficult for the honest people who legitimately need to use cash for survival, for safety, or just for simple commerce.
This raises an important question then. Is the political effort and the social cost making life harder for the elderly, for domestic abuse victims, the financially excluded? Is it worth that marginal 4% benefit to government revenue?
That's the core trade-off. It forces us to ask if the focus on cash is based on sort of outdated assumptions about crime rather than a genuine analysis of where modern financial crime actually operates.
So what does this all mean? When you synthesize all the sources, cash is revealed not as a vestige of the past, but as a great unifier and a vital piece of modern social and security infrastructure. It appeals across the entire political spectrum. The left views cash as a critical social justice issue, making sure 12% of the population aren't financially excluded.
Right. And the right regards it as protection of personal privacy and a bulwark against potential government overreach and surveillance. Plus, it actively bolsters national security and community resilience in a crisis.
It's an incredibly compelling case for keeping the option alive. But the sources provide one final, crucial warning. Simply hiding cash under a mattress is not a sufficient strategy to preserve the system.
Why not? If I have my $472 emergency stash,
I'm covered in a crisis.
You're covered in the short term.
Hmm.
But if cash is only held for emergencies, the necessary financial and social infrastructure required for it to operate, the willingness of retailers to handle it, the banking services required for businesses to deposit it, that will eventually disappear.
Because if nobody spends cash,
Then nobody will accept cash. The system is built on continuous circulation.
so the goal is to keep cash in the economic bloodstream, not just in a safe.
Mm.
Which leads directly to Zagorski's appeal to the consumer. It is crucial not just to hold on to cash, but to actively spend it regularly to ensure the system remains viable. That's the practical application of all this knowledge. The call to action is simple, but it's powerful. Convince yourself and everyone you know to use paper money at least once a week. Buy something in cash. Anything.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought to consider.
In a world of increasing digital vulnerability, data tracking, and systemic failure risk, if we choose not to use cash regularly, are we inadvertently accelerating the loss of a vital, universally recognized backup system? A system that we may desperately need the next time a wildfire, a flood, or a widespread power outage hits. Think about that next time you reach for your phone to tap for that small purchase.